The crystal chamber floated in space above a world called Nexus Prime. Inside, 53 different alien species sat in their designated seats. Some had scales, some had fur, and some glowed with strange lights. This was the Galactic Council, and today they were making a decision about Earth. Ambassador Ji-Wan stood at the human platform. She was a tall woman with short black hair and tired eyes. For 3 years, she had been trying to convince the council to accept humans as members. 3 long years of meetings, presentations, and endless paperwork. Today was supposed to be different. Today she needed their help. The holographic displays around the chamber showed disturbing images. A fleet of 300 warships was moving toward Earth. They were krill ships, ugly things that looked like they were made from bones and metal fused together. Green lights pulsed along their hulls like infected wounds. Ji-Wan's hands shook slightly as she spoke. She kept them clasped behind her back so no one would notice. Her voice remained steady and calm, the way diplomats were trained to speak. "Members of the council," she said, "the krill fleet will reach Earth in 48 hours. Our homeworld has 8 billion people. We are asking for military assistance." A reptilian creature rose from his seat. This was High Counselor Vexthar, leader of the Korath Empire. His scales were deep purple, and his yellow eyes looked at Ji-Wan with something between pity and contempt. He had been alive for over 200 years, and he had seen dozens of young civilizations come and go. "Ambassador Ji-Wan," Vexthar said, his voice like stones grinding together. "We have reviewed your military capabilities. The analysis is clear." Another hologram appeared, showing numbers and charts. A military analyst, an insect-like creature with multiple eyes, began to explain. Her voice clicked and whistled, but the translation came through clearly. "The krill have conquered 17 civilizations in the past century. Their hive-mind coordination is perfect. Their bioweapons adapt to any defense. The human fleet has 89 ships. Most are converted civilian vessels." More data scrolled across the screens. Time projections. Casualty estimates. All of it painted the same picture. Human resistance will collapse in 6 to 8 hours after first contact, the analyst concluded. Total planetary conquest will be complete within 72 hours. Ji-Wan felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had known the odds were bad, but hearing it stated so clinically made it real. Still, she forced herself to speak. "Then we need help now," she said, "before it is too late. The Council has defensive fleets. You could send ships to reinforce our position." Vexthar made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was not a kind sound. "You have had faster-than-light travel for only 30 years, he said. 30 years. Some species in this chamber have had it for 10,000. You are children playing with technology you barely understand. You have never faced a true interstellar threat. Your military doctrine is based on fighting yourselves, not coordinated hive minds." Other council members were nodding. A floating jellyfish-like creature pulsed with agreement. A crystalline being chimed in harmony, but there were some who looked uncomfortable. Counselor Thex, who resembled a praying mantis covered in blue chitin, shifted in his seat. His species had once been where humans were now. He remembered what it felt like to be dismissed. Vexthar continued warming to his subject. He gestured with clawed hands, his tail swishing behind him. "The Council operates on a principle we call natural selection. Species that cannot defend themselves do not deserve protection. It is harsh, yes, but it is necessary. The galaxy is not kind to the weak." Ji-Wan felt anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp. She pushed it down. Anger would not help. "Not here. We are not weak," she said quietly. "We are inexperienced." "There is a difference, is there?" Vexthar asked. "We shall see. I call for a vote. All those in favor of military intervention to protect Earth?" Lights appeared above each council seat. Green for yes, red for no. Ji-Wan watched as the lights flickered on one by one. Red, red, red. A few greens appeared, including Thex's, but they were overwhelmed by the tide of red. Final count. 47 against. 6 in favor. "The motion fails," Vexthar announced. "The Council will observe the situation but will not intervene. We will honor the memory of humanity as we have honored the memory of others who could not survive." Ji-Wan stood very still. She felt like she was watching this happen to someone else. Her people were going to die, and these beings who could help were choosing to watch instead. She bowed slightly, the gesture stiff and formal. "Then we will defend ourselves," she said. And when this is over, regardless of the outcome, the galaxy will remember that humans stood alone. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her steps were measured, controlled. Only when she reached the private communication booth outside the chamber did she let herself slump against the wall. Her hands were shaking badly now. She pulled out her personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to General Hyunwoo, the commander of Earth's defense fleet. The message was short. No help coming. We are on our own. Show them what we are made of. Back in the council chamber, technicians were setting up observation equipment. They would broadcast the coming battle to all member species. Some saw it as a learning opportunity. Others saw it as entertainment. A few, like Thex, saw it as a tragedy they were powerless to prevent. Vexthar returned to his seat, satisfied that order had been maintained. He had seen this scenario play out many times before. A young species, full of confidence, encounters something bigger than themselves. They fight bravely, they die gloriously, and the galaxy moves on. He expected this to be no different. Far away in the cold darkness near Neptune, General Hyunwoo received Jiwon's message. He was standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. They were professionals, trained for this moment, though most had never seen real combat against aliens. Hyunwoo was an old man by military standards. He had gray hair and a face lined with scars from Earth's unification wars. Those wars had been brutal, but they had taught humanity how to fight smart when fighting strong wasn't enough. He read the message twice, then looked up at his tactical officer, Commander Doyen. The council said no. Hyunwoo said simply. Doyen nodded. He was younger, sharper, with eyes that never seemed to miss anything. He had been studying the Krill for weeks, analyzing every piece of data they could find. Then we do it our way, Doyen said. Hyunwoo allowed himself a small, grim smile. Send the signal, he said. All ships. Operation Thermopylae is now active. And someone get Dr. Soman on the line. We are going to need those special weapons ready. As the crew jumped into action, Hyunwoo looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 300 enemy ships were coming to destroy his home. The council said humanity would last 6 to 8 hours. He intended to prove them wrong. 3 weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless calculations. Taeho barely left his laboratory. His colleague Jiho, a neuroscience specialist, practically moved in to help him. Together they worked on adapting the lens technology for Velkara biology. The challenge was enormous. Rila's brain had never processed visual information. If they simply gave her sight all at once, her mind might not be able to handle it. She could suffer permanent damage. Or her brain might reject the input entirely, leaving her in worse pain than before. We need to introduce it gradually, Jiho explained one night, pointing at a simulation on the screen. Like teaching a newborn to see, but compressed into days instead of months. The lenses will need to control exactly how much visual data reaches her brain at any given time. Taeho nodded, adjusting the parameters. And at the same time, they need to regulate her other senses, dampen them enough to stop the pain, but not so much that she loses her natural abilities. Rila visited the lab every day. She could not help with the technical work, but her presence motivated them. She would sit quietly in the corner, listening to them work. Sometimes she asked questions about what seeing was like. Taeho found himself trying to explain concepts he had never thought about before. What is blue? Rila asked one day. Taeho paused his work. He looked at the blue light on his equipment. How could he explain color to someone who had never seen? Blue is calm, he said finally. Like cool water or a clear sky. It is peaceful, quiet. Does that make sense? Rila tilted her head. So colors have feelings? Sort of. Yes, they make you feel things when you see them. That sounds beautiful, Rila said softly. I hope I can understand it. Finally, after 23 days of constant work, the lenses were ready. They looked like thin films, almost invisible, but they contained incredibly complex technology. Tiny processors that would interface directly with Rila's neural pathways, sensors that would monitor her brain activity and adjust in real time. Yoonji joined them for the procedure. She would monitor Rila's vital signs and provide immediate translation if anything went wrong. Minho insisted on being present too, though there was nothing he could do except wait and hope. The medical room was quiet. Rila lay on the examination table, her hands clenched at her sides. Even though she tried to hide it, Taeho could tell she was afraid. Are you ready? Teho asked gently. Yes, Rila said. Her voice was steady despite her fear. Just tell me what will happen. First, the lenses will create small openings in your eyelids. You will feel a slight tingling. Then they will stimulate your optic nerves very gently. At first you might see nothing. Or you might see light. Just light without form or meaning. We will go very slowly. If you feel pain or discomfort, tell me immediately and I will stop. Rila nodded. Teho carefully placed the lenses on her fused eyelids. They adhered instantly, their edges blending seamlessly with her skin. He activated them with a remote control, monitoring the readings on his screen. Beginning now, he said softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Rila gasped. Her body went rigid. Minho moved forward in alarm, but Yunji held up a hand, watching the vital signs carefully. Rila, talk to me, Taiho said urgently. What are you experiencing? I do not know, Rila said. Her voice was shaking. Something is happening. It is not sound. It is not touch. There is something there. In front of me. What is it? That is light, Teho said, his own voice tight with emotion. You are seeing light. Not clearly yet. But you are seeing. Rila's breathing became rapid. Too fast. The readings showed her stress levels rising. Taiho immediately reduced the optical input to almost nothing. It is too much, Rila gasped. Too strange. Too different. I have reduced it, Teho said quickly. You are safe. We will go slower. Much slower. Over the next hour they worked carefully. Teho would increase the optical input by tiny amounts. Rila would describe what she experienced. Then they would pause, letting her brain adjust before continuing. It was exhausting for everyone, but especially for Rila. But slowly, remarkably, progress happened. Rila began to distinguish between light and dark. Then she noticed when someone moved in front of a light source. Her brain was learning, adapting, making sense of signals it had never received before. And something else happened too. The pain she had lived with for so long began to fade. The lenses were regulating her hypersensitive hearing and touch, bringing them down to normal levels. For the first time in her life, Rila existed without constant suffering. The pain, she whispered at one point. It is gone, I cannot believe it. It is actually gone. She began to cry, not from pain but from relief. Minho, hearing his daughter's tears, moved to her side and took her hand. He was crying too. After that first day, Teho established a careful training schedule. Each morning, Rila would come to the lab. He would gradually increase the complexity of what the lenses allowed her to see. Shapes, movement, depth, each new element had to be introduced slowly so her brain could integrate it. By the end of the first week, Rila could identify simple objects. A ball, a cup, a chair. She would reach out and touch them, matching what she saw with what she felt. The joy on her face was beautiful to watch. This is my father, she said one day, looking at Minho. The lenses were showing her a simplified version of faces now, just basic shapes and contrasts. But it was enough. She reached up and touched his face, matching the visual image with the tactile memory she had always had. Minho embraced her, overwhelmed. Through Yunji, he thanked Taiho over and over. But Taiho felt uncomfortable with the gratitude. He had only done what any decent person would do. He had seen someone suffering and tried to help. By the second week, Rila was ready for color. Taiho introduced it very carefully. First just red, then blue, then green. Each color was like a revelation to her. She would stare at colored objects for long minutes, trying to absorb and understand them. Blue really is calm, she said, looking at a blue light. You were right, and red is intense, urgent, like a warning. Yes, Taiho said, smiling despite himself. That is exactly right. Rila's personality changed as the pain left her life. Before she had been quiet and withdrawn, conserving energy to deal with her suffering. Now she became curious and energetic. She asked endless questions about everything she saw. She wanted to see the stars, so they took her to the observation deck. She stood there for hours, staring at the starfield, crying quietly with wonder. I never imagined this existed, she said. All my life I heard about space. But seeing it, seeing the stars, I have no words. Teho found himself enjoying her company. She made him see his own world differently. Things he took for granted became magical through her eyes. A simple flower. The way light reflected off water. The expression on a person's face. She noticed everything. treasured everything, but not everything was perfect. Late in the second week, a new visitor arrived at the station. Sister Hana was a Velkara religious official, a member of the Seers of Darkness. She had come on a routine diplomatic visit, completely unaware of what was happening in Taiho's laboratory. Minho, learning of her arrival, immediately became anxious. Hana was not just any seer. She had been his friend since childhood. She was devout but also intelligent and compassionate. If anyone might understand what they had done, it would be her. But she would also feel obligated to report to the religious authorities. There was a formal dinner to welcome Hana to the station. Minho and Rila attended. Rila wore a hood to hide her eyes, but Taiho knew it would not be enough. Hana had been trained since childhood to perceive the world through sound, touch, and scent. She would notice something was different. Taiho watched from the back of the room. He was not good at social events and had only come because Yunji insisted. But he was glad he did. He saw the exact moment when Hana realized something was wrong. Rila was speaking to another diplomat. She turned her head to follow the conversation. But she turned it too precisely. She was not relying on sound to locate the speaker. She was looking at them. Watching them, Hana went very still. Her head tilted slightly, the way someone might look if they were seeing something impossible. She made her way across the room to Minho and requested a private conversation. Her tone was polite but firm. Minho had no choice. He agreed. An hour later, Yunji contacted Taiho urgently. Minho wants us to meet with Hana, all of us, tonight. They gathered in the same conference room where this had all begun. Hana sat across from them, her posture stiff. Rila sat beside her father, trembling slightly. She had removed her hood. There was no point in hiding anymore. Hana spoke in Velkara. Her voice was controlled, but Taiho could hear the tension in it. Yunji translated quietly. Minho, what have you done? What has been done to your daughter? Minho began to explain. He told her about Rila's pain, about the human technology, about the truth they had discovered. When he finished, the room was silent for a long time. Finally, Hana spoke again. Show me. Taiho opened his laptop and displayed the genetic data. He explained what it showed. That the Velkara had been deliberately made blind. That their entire religious foundation was built on something artificial. Hana processed the data through a tactile interface. She was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller, uncertain. If this is true, if we were made blind, then everything I believe, everything I have taught, it is all. She could not finish. Taiho felt a wave of sympathy for her.
Hina, the Galactic Council chamber had changed.
The meeting hall where species debated policy was now an observation theater. Giant holographic displays floated in the air, showing the Sol system in perfect detail. Every moon, every planet, every human ship appeared as glowing icons. Ambassador Jiwon stood at her platform. She had been standing there for 6 hours straight, refusing to sit, refusing to rest. Her legs ached, but she did not move. Her people were about to fight for their lives. The least she could do was watch. Around her, the council members settled into their seats. Some brought refreshments. High Counselor Vexithar had a server bring him a drink that steamed and smelled of sulfur. To him, this was just another day. Counselor Thek sat near the front, his crystalline eyes fixed on the displays.
Unlike the others, he looked uncomfortable.
His mandibles clicked nervously. Then at the edge of the Sol system, something appeared. The Krill fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 300 ships materialized like ghosts becoming solid. The council chamber fell silent. Even those who had been joking moments before stopped talking. There was something terrifying about the Krill fleet. The ships were not clean and geometric like most species built. They looked organic, like bones and metal had been grown together. Green lights pulsed along their hulls in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. A Krill expert, an elderly Rokan scholar, spoke up. His voice was translated into a dry, academic tone. The Krill are organizing into their standard attack formation, 15 battle groups, 20 ships each. The central command vessels are the larger ones. Everything is proceeding according to their established patterns. The battle groups began moving inward, heading toward Earth. They moved with disturbing coordination, like schools of predatory fish. A tactical analyst, her multifaceted eyes scanning multiple displays at once, began providing commentary. Human fleet is holding position at Earth orbit, 89 vessels total. They are not advancing to meet the enemy. Defensive posture confirmed. This is tactically sound but ultimately futile against this level of force. Vexthar made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. They should evacuate, he said. Save what population they can. This defense is meaningless. Jiwon spoke for the first time in hours. Her voice was quiet but clear. Humans do not run, she said. Not from our homes. Not from our families. We fight. Vexthar looked at her with something that might have been pity. He said nothing more. On the bridge of the indomitable, General Hyunwoo watched his own displays. The Krill fleet was 30 minutes away. The timing had to be perfect. Status on Shadow of Sol? He asked. Commander Doyen checked his console. The stealth frigate appeared as a faint ghost on their sensors, barely visible even to friendly systems. Captain Minji reports null field at maximum efficiency. She is threading through their outer perimeter now. The Krill have not detected her. Hyunwoo allowed himself a small breath of relief. So far, the plan was working. Aboard Shadow of Sol, Captain Minji sat in the pilot's seat with her hands steady on the controls. Around her, the bridge crew worked in near silence. Every unnecessary system was powered down to maximize stealth. Through the view screen, she could see Krill ships passing on all sides. They were huge up close, each one the size of a city block. Bioweapons grew along their hulls like tumors. She could see crew moving inside through translucent sections of hull, pale figures working in green-lit corridors. Lieutenant Hajun worked at the sensor station, tracking each hive node ship. They had identified 12 so far. 3 more to go, Captain, Hajun whispered, though there was no logical reason to whisper. Node 13 bearing 270. Node 14 at 045. Still searching for Node 15. Minji adjusted course, slipping between 2 Krill destroyers. The gap was narrow enough that she could have reached out and touched both hulls if the window had been open. But they did not see her. The null field made Shadow of Sol invisible, a hole in space where a ship should be. There, another crew member said. Node 15. Dead center of the formation, Minji saw it. The largest hive node, probably the fleet coordinator. It was protected by layers of other ships, a fortress within a fortress. Mark all targets, Minji ordered. Prepare beacon launchers. In the council chamber, the Krill fleet was now only 15 minutes from Earth. The human orbital defense platforms were powering up. Energy readings spiked across the displays. The tactical analyst noted this. Human defenses are preparing to fire. Estimated time until first contact, 12 minutes. Revised prediction. Human fleet will be combat ineffective within 4 to 6 hours. Several council members made notes. This would be valuable data for their military academies. How not to conduct a defense against superior forces. Then something unexpected appeared on the displays. The analyst blinked her many eyes in confusion. Energy signature detected deep within Krill formation. Unknown origin. It appears to be. Aboard Shadow of Sol, Minji gave the order. Fire all beacons. Now! 15 tracking beacons launched from hidden tubes on the frigate's hull. They were tiny, no bigger than a human fist, but they burned bright on sensors. Each one attached itself to a hive node ship with magnetic clamps. Alarms blared throughout the Krill fleet. They had found the intruder. Minji did not waste time. She pushed the engines to maximum, vectoring away from the center of the formation. 3 Krill destroyers turned to pursue, their weapons charging. Hajun, Minji said calmly, transmit targeting data to fleet. All channels. Transmitted, Hajun confirmed. Fleet acknowledges. They have the coordinates. The Krill destroyers opened fire. Bioplasma bolts ripped through space. Minji threw the ship into a roll, evading the first barrage. But there were too many. Shadow of Sol shuddered as several shots struck the shields. Back at Earth, General Hyunwoo received the data. All 15 targets marked. He did not hesitate. All ships, he broadcast. Fire on my mark. Target the marked vessels only. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 127 quantum disruption torpedoes launched. They appeared on sensors as strange distortions, bending space around themselves as they accelerated. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The analyst was frantically checking her readings. Impossible, she said. Those torpedo signatures. That is quantum disruption technology. How do the humans have quantum disruption technology? They should not even understand the theory behind it. Vexthar stood up from his seat, his drink forgotten. His yellow eyes were wide. The torpedoes flew through space on impossible trajectories. The Krill tried to intercept them, firing defensive weapons, launching countermeasures. Nothing worked. The torpedoes used micro-wormhole technology to skip past obstacles. All 15 Hive node ships were struck within 3 seconds of each other. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The quantum disruption tore the Hive nodes apart from the inside. Their bio-neural networks collapsed. The ships exploded in cascades of green fire, taking nearby vessels with them. The Krill fleet descended into chaos. Without the Hive nodes, the battle groups lost coordination. Ships fired wildly, some hitting their own allies. Formations broke apart. In the council chamber, no one spoke. They were all staring at the displays in disbelief. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. Ambassador Jiwan allowed herself the smallest smile. Her hands gripped the platform railing so hard her knuckles were white, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Minutes," she said quietly. "Not hours, minutes." The space between Earth and Mars became a storm of fire and destruction. With the Hive nodes destroyed, the Krill fleet was no longer a coordinated war machine. It was 300 confused, angry ships, each one acting on instinct rather than strategy. General Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. A Krill plasma bolt had struck their forward shields, and the feedback had blown out several bridge stations. 2 crew members were being carried to medical, but Hyunwoo stayed at his post. "All ships," he broadcast, his voice carrying to the entire fleet. "Execute Protocol Thermopylae. We advance. Drive wedges into their formations. Make them pay for every meter of space." The human fleet surged forward. It was not the action of a species trying to survive. It was the action of a species trying to win. Captain Yoonji, commanding the destroyer Steadfast, led her battle group straight into the heart of a disorganized Krill cluster. Her ships spread out in a formation humans called the Hammer and Anvil, learned from centuries of warfare on Earth. "All batteries, fire at will," she ordered. "Target their weapons first, then their engines. Leave them crippled, then move to the next target." The Steadfast opened fire with every weapon it had. Railguns sent solid metal slugs at relativistic speeds. Missiles spiraled out in complex patterns. Energy weapons carved glowing lines through the darkness. A Krill cruiser tried to return fire, but it was slow, confused. The Steadfast was already moving, rolling to present its thickest armor. The Krill shots went wide. In the council chamber, the mood had completely changed. Council members were leaning forward in their seats. The casual atmosphere was gone, replaced by shocked attention. The tactical analyst was updating her predictions in real time, her voice increasingly uncertain. "Human fleet is not retreating. They are advancing into the disrupted enemy formation. This is tactically aggressive beyond standard doctrine. They are using kamikaze protocols but evacuating crews before detonation. Resource expenditure is extreme, but effectiveness is undeniable." A converted cargo hauler, its hull painted with the flag of Brazil, rammed into a Krill destroyer. Just before impact, its crew of 16 teleported to a nearby frigate using emergency beaming technology. The hauler's reactor went critical, and the explosion took out 3 more Krill ships. Vexthar was standing now, unable to look away from the displays. His scales had paled to a sickly lavender. "They are using their ships as weapons," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every vessel was built with self-destruct protocols. This entire fleet was designed to be sacrificed if necessary." Counselor Thex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. "Of course they did," he said. "They are a species that has been at war with itself for its entire existence. They know how to make everything a weapon because they have had to." Commander Doyen coordinated the battle from his station aboard the Indomitable. His mind processed hundreds of data streams at once, tracking every ship, every weapon, every opportunity. "General," he said, "orbital platforms are ready for final protocol." Hyunwoo nodded. He had been saving this for the right moment. "Execute it," he ordered. The orbital defense platforms around Earth had a secret. They were not just weapons. They were also massive mass drivers, electromagnetic catapults that had been collecting asteroids from the belt for years. Now those asteroids launched, hundreds of them, ranging from the size of cars to the size of buildings. They were accelerated to relativistic speeds, turned into kinetic kill vehicles that hit with the force of nuclear weapons. The council analyst stopped talking. She just stared at the readings, her multiple eyes wide with disbelief. The asteroids tore through the Krill fleet like bullets through paper. Ships that had survived for centuries were obliterated in seconds. The Krill tried to evade, but they were still disorganized, still struggling without their hive nodes. Deep in the krill formation, Captain Minji was still fighting. Shadow of Sol was heavily damaged, trailing atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, but she was still alive, still flying. 3 krill destroyers surrounded her. They fired from all sides. The frigate's shields flickered and died. Warning alarms screamed. "Captain," Lieutenant Hajun said, "shields are gone. Hull breaches on all decks. We have maybe 2 minutes before life support fails." Minji looked at her crew. They were young. They deserved to live. But they had completed their mission. The hive nodes were destroyed. The fleet had the targeting data. Everything else was just buying time. She made her decision. "Everyone to the escape pods," she ordered. "Right now." "That is an order." Hajun looked at her. He understood immediately. "Captain, you cannot." "I can and I will," Minji said firmly. "You have families. I need someone to tell them what happened here. Now go. You have 30 seconds. The crew hesitated only a moment. Then they ran for the escape pods. They knew better than to waste the time she was giving them by arguing. Minji waited until she saw all 12 escape pods launch on her sensors. Then she strapped herself into the pilot's seat and took manual control of the ship. The nearest krill destroyer was lining up for a killing shot. Minji smiled grimly and punched the engines to maximum. Shadow of Sol leaped forward, accelerating directly at the destroyer. The krill crew had a moment to realize what was happening. Then Minji overloaded the reactor. The explosion was visible from Earth. Shadow of Sol detonated at point-blank range to the destroyer. The blast consumed not just that ship but the 2 others nearby. 3 krill destroyers ceased to exist in a flash of white light. In the council chamber, someone made a low sound of grief. It might have been Counselor Thek's. Ambassador Jiwan closed her eyes briefly. She had known Minji. They had met during diplomatic training. A brilliant young woman with so much life ahead of her. But this was war. And in war, heroes died. The battle raged on. Minutes passed like hours. The krill fleet was being torn apart, but they were still dangerous. A wounded animal fights hardest when it knows it is dying. A krill battleship managed to get its weapons locked on the Indomitable. It fired everything it had. The flagship's shields held for the first barrage, flickered under the second, and collapsed under the third. The bridge of the Indomitable exploded. General Hyunwoo was thrown against a bulkhead. He felt ribs crack. Blood filled his mouth, but he pulled himself up using a ruined console. "Report," he said, spitting blood. Commander Doyen was still at his station, his uniform torn and burned. Hull breaches on all decks. Life support failing. "We have lost 40% of the fleet, but the krill have lost 70%. They are starting to retreat, sir. The ones that can still move are breaking off." Hyunwoo looked at the tactical display. Doyen was right. The surviving krill ships were turning away, trying to escape to faster-than-light speeds. "Do not let them go," Hyunwoo said. "Pursue, finish it." What was left of the human fleet gave chase. They were battered, bleeding, but they were not stopping. Not until this was done. A young pilot named Lieutenant Hajun, who had been rescued from Shadow of Sol's escape pod, led a squadron of fighters in the final push. His eyes were red from crying for his captain, but his hands were steady on the controls. "For Captain Minji," he broadcast to his squadron. "For everyone we lost, do not let a single one escape." The fighters swarmed the retreating krill. They were like wolves bringing down prey, coordinated and merciless. The last krill battleship tried to make it to the edge of the system. The human cruiser Defiant intercepted it. Captain Taewon, the grizzled veteran, gave a simple order. Full broadside. "End this." Every weapon on the Defiant fired at once. The krill battleship broke apart, sections of it spinning off into the dark. And then it was over. Silence fell across the battlefield. The space between Earth and Mars was filled with debris, burning wrecks, and the bodies of the dead. But Earth survived. Humanity survived. In the Galactic Council chamber, no one spoke for a long time. They just stared at the displays showing the aftermath. 300 krill ships had entered the Sol system. Not one remained intact. The human fleet had lost 63 ships. Another 20 were heavily damaged. But they had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. The tactical analyst finally spoke, her voice shaking. Total time from first contact to final enemy vessel destroyed, 37 minutes. 37 minutes. The council had predicted 6 to 8 hours. They had been wrong by more than an order of magnitude. Slowly, Counselor Thex began to click his mandibles in a rhythmic pattern. It was his species' form of applause. Other council members joined in their own ways. Trumpeting calls, bioluminescent flashes, harmonic vibrations. High Counselor Vexthar sat down heavily in his seat. He looked old suddenly, his scales dull. Ambassador Jiwan stood at her platform, tears running down her face. But she was smiling. Her people had done the impossible. They had saved themselves, and they had done it in minutes, not hours. She whispered to herself, though several nearby council members heard her. I told you all. 5 years had passed since the Treaty of Kepler 442. Taiho stood on the observation deck of the newly completed Perception Institute, watching ships come and go. The institute floated in the same neutral space where Kepler 442 had been, but it was much larger, a joint project of both species, dedicated to understanding different ways of experiencing reality. The last 5 years had been difficult but transformative. Velkara society had evolved into something neither side had imagined. The latest surveys showed that about 40% of adult Velkara had chosen to adopt sight. 50% remained traditionally blind, and 10% moved between states, sometimes wearing lenses and sometimes not, depending on context and preference. Cities had adapted to accommodate both populations. Buildings featured both visual and tactile signage. Public spaces were designed to be navigable through multiple senses. A renaissance of art and philosophy had emerged from those who experienced both modes of perception. Velkara paintings often included textures for the blind to feel. Music was composed with both hearing and vibration in mind. Architecture became a form that engaged all senses equally. The path of eternal darkness continued, but it had reformed significantly. Under new leadership after Bora's retirement, it focused on the spiritual and philosophical aspects of sensory experience rather than enforcing blindness. Many sighted Velkara still followed the path, finding value in its teachings about inner understanding and the limits of physical perception. Rila worked at the institute now. She had become one of the leading researchers on perception philosophy, publishing papers that bridged Velkara and human understanding. She taught courses to both species, helping them understand what she called the gift of multiple perspectives. She found Taiho on the observation deck. She often wore her lenses now, but she still removed them regularly to maintain her connection to her blind heritage. Lost in thought again? She asked, smiling. Some things never change, Taiho smiled back. He was better at social interaction now. 5 years of working closely with Velkara had taught him to communicate more effectively. Just thinking about how far we have come, it still seems impossible sometimes. Rila leaned against the railing beside him. My father is giving a lecture today on ancient Velkara history, the real history, not the edited version. Would you like to attend? Taiho nodded. He enjoyed Minho's lectures. The elder had become a historian, documenting the truth about their species' past. His work helped younger generations understand that their genetic modification was not shameful, but a tragedy their ancestors had endured and overcome. The lecture hall was full. Both humans and Velkara attended, a mix of sighted and blind. Translation devices allowed everyone to follow along regardless of their sensory capabilities. Minho stood at the front, his presence still commanding despite his age. Today I want to talk about the War of Harmony, Minho began. That is what our ancestors called it, though there was nothing harmonious about it. It was a civil war so brutal that one faction decided the only way to end it was to fundamentally change what we were. They created a biological weapon that altered our genetics permanently. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. They believed sight caused vanity, greed, and violence. They were partially correct. Visual hierarchies did contribute to social inequality in our sighted ancestors, but they made a terrible mistake. They assumed the problem was the sense itself rather than how it was used. For thousands of years, we lived with the consequences of their choice. We built a beautiful culture from that limitation. We developed wisdom about inner sight, about understanding beyond the physical. That wisdom is real and valuable, but it came at a cost. We lost knowledge. We lost freedom. We lost the ability to choose our own paths. Minho's voice grew stronger. Now we are reclaiming that freedom. Some of us choose sight. Some of us choose darkness. Some of us choose both. And that diversity is making us stronger, not weaker. We are becoming something new. Not just blind Velkara. Not just sighted Velkara. but Velkara who understand multiple ways of being. After the lecture, students approached Minho with questions. Teho watched as the elder patiently answered each one. It reminded him of how much had changed. 5 years ago, asking these questions would have been heresy. Now they were normal academic discourse. Later that evening, there was a celebration. The Institute was hosting a cultural exchange event. Both human and Velkara performers would showcase their arts. Taiho had been invited but was hesitant to attend. He still preferred quiet laboratories to crowded social events. Yunji found him trying to escape. "Oh no, you do not. You are coming to this. You helped create this entire situation. The least you can do is celebrate what came from it." The celebration was held in a large hall designed to engage all senses. Visual art lined the walls, but each piece also had tactile elements. Music played, but the floor vibrated with the rhythm so blind attendees could feel them. Scent stations filled the air with fragrances that told stories without words. Teho watched humans and Velkara mingling freely. Many humans now wore the reverse lenses periodically, experiencing the world through enhanced hearing and touch. They spoke excitedly about what they learned during these experiences. The humility it taught them, the different kinds of beauty they discovered. Jiho, Taiho's colleague, had become one of the most dedicated practitioners. He wore the reverse lenses for weeks at a time, claiming it made him a better neuroscientist. Understanding perception from the inside, not just as data, changed how he thought about consciousness itself. During the event, Hana gave a speech. The former seer had become a philosopher and teacher, helping both species understand each other. She stood before the crowd, blind as she had always been, but radiant with purpose. 5 years ago, I thought my world was ending, she said. Everything I believed was challenged. I felt betrayed, angry, lost, but now I understand that beliefs worth having can survive being challenged. The path of eternal darkness taught me to seek understanding beyond the surface. That teaching is even more valuable now that I know sight exists. Inner vision becomes more precious, not less, when you understand what outer vision reveals and what it hides. She turned toward where she knew Ryla stood. My young friend showed me something important. She experienced both darkness and light, and instead of choosing one over the other, she embraced both. She showed me that identity can be flexible without being shallow, that we can change and grow while still honoring where we came from. The crowd applauded. Rila smiled, touched by Hana's words. She had been nervous about how history would judge her role in all this. But increasingly, she was seen not as a heretic but as a bridge, someone who helped her people expand their understanding of themselves. Later, Teho found himself in a quiet corner with Bora. The former Supreme Seer attended these events occasionally, though she usually stayed in the background. She had retired from religious leadership but remained influential. Many still sought her counsel. Something remarkable had happened a year after the treaty. Bora had requested to try sight for a single day, just one day, to understand what she had fought against. Teho had fitted her with lenses personally, adjusting them carefully for her aged biology. What she experienced in those hours remained private. She never spoke publicly about it, but witnesses reported that she wept throughout the day. Whether from joy, grief, or understanding, no one could say. She removed the lenses after the promised time and never wore them again, but something had changed in her. Now sitting beside Taiho in the quiet corner, Bora seemed at peace. "Dr. Taiho," she said softly, "I never properly thanked you for giving me that day of sight. It was the most difficult and most valuable gift I have ever received." Taiho did not know how to respond. Finally, he asked the question that had bothered him for years. "Do you regret how you fought against this? Against freedom of choice?" Bora was quiet for a long time. "Yes and no," she said finally. "I fought to preserve what we were. I should have fought to discover what we could become. But without my resistance, perhaps people would not have thought as deeply about what they were giving up. Sometimes opposition forces better understanding." She stood slowly, preparing to leave. "Before I die, I will write about my day of sight, not to advocate for it or against it, but to help others understand that choosing is hard, that both paths have value. That wisdom comes from acknowledging complexity rather than pretending simplicity." Teho watched her go, feeling a profound respect. She had been his opponent, the source of so much conflict and pain, but she had also been trying to protect her people in the only way she knew how. They had both been partially right and partially wrong, That was the nature of complex problems. As the celebration continued around him, Tejo reflected on the journey. It had started with a simple desire to help one person in pain. It had spiraled into conflict that nearly destroyed relationships between entire species. But ultimately it had led to something beautiful. Not perfect, but beautiful. Velkara society was now more diverse and vibrant than ever. They had artists who painted with both sight and touch, philosophers who wrote about the relationship between different modes of perception, scientists who studied how consciousness itself varied based on sensory input,